Dr. Benjamin J. Hubbard is Professor Emeritus of Religious Studies at California State University, Fullerton, where he has taught for the past 37 years, 15 of them as department chair. His teaching and research areas are in Jewish studies, biblical studies, religion and politics, and religion and the media. He taught previously at St. Jerome's University in Canada and Marquette University in Milwaukee. Ben received his Ph.D. in religious studies from the University of Iowa and a master's degree in both theology and journalism from Marquette University. He has co-authored or edited a number of books and scholarly articles, most recently, A Battlefield of Values, America's Left, Right, and Endangered Center, with Stephen Burgard in 2016, America's Religions, An Educator's Guide to Belief and Practices, with James Santucci and John Hatfield, 1997, revised 2007, The Abraham Connection, A Jew, Christian, and Muslim in Dialogue, 1994, and Reporting Religion, Facts and Faith, 1990. Dr. Hubbard has been active for many years in the interfaith movement, currently as a member of the Orange County Catholic Jewish Dialogue Group. Dr. Hubbard was in past years a frequent contributor to the op-ed pages of the Los Angeles Times and the Orange County Register. He was associate editor of the Wisconsin Jewish Chronicle in 1982 and 1983. Dr. Hubbard received the Distinguished Professor Award in the College of Humanities and Social Sciences at Cal State in 1993 and the John Cronquist Memorial Award as Outstanding University Mentor in 1999. Ben is currently married to artist Judy Hubbard and has 2 children and 5 grandchildren. He is a U.S. Army Cold War era veteran. It is my distinct honor to introduce Dr. Benjamin J. Hubbard, discussing militant Christian nationalism.
Thank you. Okay. Nice to be here. We have a nice group, and I see we already have a lot of people who want to get into the chat, so I'm going to try to give enough time for people to talk and answer questions, because that's what makes it really interesting. So anyway, I wrote this book, Battlefield Values, and it came out in January, February of 2016, so just when Trump's campaign was warming up. And so I wasn't, there was no commentary on candidate Trump or President Trump, but so many of the issues that I talk about in the book are still with us. The incredible divisiveness that the country has dealt with, and my notion of an endangered center. I think the center is more endangered now than it was in 2016 by far. Every day I read about more and more conflict and misunderstandings. There's a big brouhaha in San Clemente about a teacher who had gone to the rally on January 6th. And anyway, you can see that with a rally going on as we speak at the pier, and so much dissent and tumult, that we are at a very pivotal moment in history, and there's not a need for people of goodwill to work together to try to do some healing in this country. So anyway, I think we have the first slide up there. Pardon me. Okay, biblical fundamentalism. Just very quickly, this didn't exist until really the late 1800s. I mean, there have always been people who took the Bible more literally and more conservatively. And of course, there was a time when the Bible was considered absolutely inerrant, and every Christian believed that. But with the Enlightenment and the freedom of European scholars to look at the Bible, dispassionately and without the problems of the church looking over their shoulder, they began to see that there were inconsistencies in the Bible. In fact, Spinoza, the great, he should be a real humanist, he wrote to humanists. He began to see these inconsistencies in the accounts of the biblical flood and the creation stories and so forth. And little by little, a group of Protestant biblical scholars, especially in Germany, began to say things like, well, did Jesus really walk on water? Or is that simply a symbol of how Jesus is a personification of God, and who he, symbolically walks on the waters, cures the world, uh, calms the sea, and so forth. So, or the virgin birth. Is that simply something like the miraculous births of of Sarah in her old age and had Isaac, or did it really happen? So little by little, they began to tinker with, whether the Bible was really literally true. And um, a lot of people thought that was very refreshing. But the other side, the conservatives, were very upset by this. And so in 1910, a group of pamphlets were put out called the Fundamentals. That's where this term came from. That said that there were some basic things that you had to believe. Uh, the divinity of Christ, the virgin birth, and the inerrancy of the Bible. There were others as well, but the inerrancy of the Bible, that was the one that really, really has caused so many problems, particularly on evolution versus creationism. So anyway, that's the background. This one side of the Christian world, which is locked into the inerrant understanding of the Bible. And so if the Bible says anything about homosexuality being an abomination, that's it. Okay, case closed, because the Bible said so. Or if the Bible said that the universe was created in 6 periods, that's it. No further discussion. Anyway, that's the first part. Then we turn to Christian nationalism, and it's pretty clear that one wing of the Christian world, and of course it's a huge world of 2.5 billion people. So you've got every conceivable shade along the spectrum of people who have beliefs that are more or less conservative or liberal. And along comes this idea of Q, the idea that there's some kind of a hidden figure somewhere who it becomes kind of a silent hero of people on the right who need some way of explaining the way the world is heading. And their explanation is that Democrats and liberals are in fact part of a kind of cabal that does almost unbelievable things. The fact that they could dream up this whole idea that Democrats, liberals do things like Satan worship, taking children and draining their blood, and child abuse. Their kind of centerpiece is child abuse. Now it's ironic because there's been no evidence for this, and we know that child abuse goes on. It's a tragedy, and tragically, it's been perpetrated by members of the clergy as well as Boy Scout leaders and many other individuals in positions of power. But they dreamed this all up, and the conspiratorial mindset has focused on this. There must be this kind of deep state person, maybe somebody like remember Deep Throat from the Nixon era. There must be some figure in there who is trying to foment the destruction of Christian conservative values, that kind of out to get conservative Christians. As I said, no evidence. But what's come about is a sense that there are wealthy Jewish individuals like George Soros and others that are plotting against Christian America. Now, I want to make clear again that, of course, there are millions of rational Christians amongst liberal Catholics, Methodists, Episcopalians, people who are very much in sync with a liberal, rational way of approaching religion and everything else. But on the other side is this powerful fundamentalist movement, and the fact that in the last 40 years, the conservative churches in this country have grown dramatically, and these liberal churches, Methodists, Episcopalians, Presbyterians, so forth, have lost membership radically, and it's had for a couple of reasons. The first is the 1973 Roe v. Wade decision. That really shook a lot of conservative folks. Then there was the gradual growth of LGBTQ rights, the whole gay rights movement, which finally ended up in the Supreme Court decision that legalized gay marriage. And so all of that, led to the angst amongst these people. And they have become quite strong and have felt the need to fight back. They feel very threatened. And in the background of this, along with the things I just mentioned, is the fact that a lot of these folks see America changing demographically. It is true. America used to be 95% white in, say, 100 years ago. Now it's more like 70%. And furthermore, the percentage of Christians in the country has diminished as well, and is less than 70%. And the number of nuns, NONES, of course, people like most of the individuals that are listening to this lecture right now, has grown, especially in people under 40. I'm sorry, under 30. The percentage is about 40% of people under the age of 30 are in the nun category. Now, that doesn't mean they all are atheists. Some of them are people who believe in some kind of higher power or God, Hashem, Adonai, Allah, whatever, but who don't have any formal religious affiliation. Or they might just say that they have a sense of a higher power, but that's it, nothing further. But anyway, there's been this shift. So these people look around, they see a world that is less white, like in California, where we have a minority majority. We don't have white people in California are no longer in the majority. They're under 50%. This bothers these people a lot. They kind of feel the world they knew was slipping away from them. And I think somehow COVID has given people too much time to think about these things. Maybe we're all in that bag, but this has been a very strange year. It really has. Whether you're left, right, or center, atheist, believer, fundamentalist, people have had so much time to kind of think almost excessively about plots and conspiracies and all of that. It's just a very different world. So all these forces are coming together, and that's why you have a rally going on as I speak right now. People are rallying at the Huntington Beach Pier, where I often ride my bike down there to meet my son. Well, he lives in Huntington Beach, and he would drive down, cycle down from his house, which is close by, and we sit around and have a Coke, and it's a great place. But today, it's a hotbed of white nationalism, and so as the slide there shows, there have been a number of ways they've tried to increase their agenda, and they've been somewhat effective at it. For example, Project Blitz. They begin at the state level, even sometimes the county level, to begin to build a constituency, to build office holders, because there's been in America, so many people don't vote. By contrast, in Australia, you have to vote. If you don't vote, you're fined. I don't want to go to that world, but nonetheless, so many people at the local level just felt that elections were important. Little by little, the ultra-conservative white nationalists have gotten a hold of county commissions, of state legislatures, and their agenda has grown. And of course, along with it is so many things they want to accomplish. They want to reintroduce prayer into the schools. In 1962 and 63, Supreme Court said that both Bible reading and prayer in schools were contrary to the First Amendment. And that's the way it should be. Yeah, but that shook up a lot of these kinds of folks very, very much. They've been, they've been trying to get prayer back into school ever since. They have not succeeded, but we have a very much more conservative Supreme Court now, and I sometimes worry about the future, even though the Supreme Court has been consistently opposed to any kind of prayer, or even a student valedictorian, for example, giving a commencement address and calling on Lord Jesus Christ in language of that kind to a group of students who include a lot of non-Christians and Jews and atheists and others. So they're worried, and they uh, they see Q as kind of this figure who can rally them. I mean, Q almost becomes a kind of a messianic figure in a way for these folks. Just amazing. And of course, uh, they're using now more any means possible, not only state legislatures and propaganda and websites, which they're very good at, in the online world we live in. But now we began with Michigan a year ago, where there were these individuals, the most radical amongst them, stormed the Capitol and tried to take Governor Whitmer a hostage. I mean, just really unbelievable in this country. I mean, this is the stuff of banana republics. This is the stuff of Myanmar or places like that. I mean, sadly, as you know, there's a terrible clampdown now on freedom in Myanmar. But I could hardly believe this. And then January the 6th, and before our very eyes, it was like a nightmare to see these people like ants or lizards crawling up the side of the Capitol and storming it and urinating in it and holding Confederate flags. I just could never have believed in my wildest dreams. And I'm a fairly senior citizen and have seen quite a lot. And this was an incredible shock. Um, so we have a force out there of angry, disillusioned, frightened people. And there's a real need to be aware of this and to go on the counteroffensive. How do we do this? Well, just one thing I think, and I don't think I put this in a PowerPoint, there has to be the ability to be compassionate and to listen. I'm pretty sure that many of you have a relative, a significant other, a friend, a brother or sister, whatever, who is in one of this fundamentalist camp. I hope not all of you, but some of you probably do. And or a next door neighbor, as in my case. And you can go out and of course rail against them and saying what nincompoops they are and so forth. Doesn't work. It just of course makes people more insulted. Poor old Hillary Clinton, slipping of the tongue to call her opponents when she was running for president deplorables. Okay, I mean maybe she thought so, but I mean that was a kiss of death. That kind of language, or Obama talking about how the conservatives kind of like their Bible and their guns. That's not the right approach. Even though, I mean, you can see they were frustrated by the kinds of machinations that were over against their attempt to become, president. But there's a need to listen to what these people have to say, hear them out, and not, not insult them. RESPECT. I mean, the famous song, but it's hard to sit there and listen to somebody say, well, I don't think I'm going to get vaccinated because, I'm pretty healthy and, I just don't think I need to. It's very, very hard to just sit there and swallow that. But if I suppose, there's a middle ground here. I mean, the response to this might be, well, okay, but remember that if you have the virus, even if you're not sick, which often happens, you can pass it on to somebody and they might die. That's one thing. The other answer, of course, say, well, you're just you're an idiot. You're just unpatriotic. Okay, everybody gets what I'm trying to say here. That there's need to try to find some common ground, even though it's very, very hard. Aretha said it best, but we got to keep saying it. RESPECT. The urge to mock an individual like this is very strong. So that's the one thing that can help a little bit. On the other hand, when people begin attacking Asians or any other group, and you just stand by and do nothing, that's bad. There's this great saying from the Talmud: "Do not stand idly by." If you hear some of this stuff, it has to be countered, even though it's very very hard. I mean, there was this famous case in Portland where a couple of some thug was beating up a black person, I think it was, or some person of color, and a couple of guys tried to intervene, and this fanatic stabbed them. So we all know that there's some pretty fanatical people out there, and so it takes courage to stand up and say, "Hey, wait a minute." But there has been too many people just standing back and doing nothing in the face of insults, especially of Asian people lately, which have been just tragedy. So we're in a tough position. When I wrote this book 4 years ago, uh, the the center was endangered, and I want to just read a line or two from a poem, famous poem. Some of you know this poem. It's by a great poet, William Butler Yeats, called The Second Coming. And it actually is a highly theological poem, actually, about his desire for kind of a messianic period. This written right after World War I. But the key lines here that really struck me were the following. Turning and turning in the winding gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loose, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Well, you know, we don't want things to fall apart. And we're in a world where it seems as though, things are falling further and further apart. And the answer, I think, is rationality, listening, and resistance. Those of us folks who are in a humanist or liberal religionist camp, like myself, have got to get out there and fight back. And I know that's what you folks are doing, and what we need to do. We clearly need to do that. I think you've kind of got the point. Okay, what I'm trying to say here. We all know about the Marjorie Taylor Greens and these other idiots that are in Congress. They're spooky people. They're scary. So the need to resist is strong. There's a hope that we can bring more people back to the center, that more and more people can become more rational. But it's an uphill battle. Okay, I think it's time for questions. I really want to get you people in the mix.
Well, thank you so much, Ben. That was a very, very wonderful presentation. And what I'm going to do is have a few questions first, just between the two of us, and then open it up to everybody else. So my first question is, what brought about the publication of this book with Stephen Burgard?
Okay. Steve Burgard and I, the late Steve Burgard and I were very close friends. He's the one who hired me to write that column for the LA Times that I wrote in the 1990s, early 2000s. He and I just bonded, and we did conferences together. And finally, one day I emailed him. By this time, he had moved from the LA Times to a professorship at Northeastern University in Boston. And I said, Steve, we got to do a column on this endangered center and the divisiveness and all this. He writes back, Ben, let's write a book. So he had a sabbatical at Harvard that year, and at the same time he was developing a very serious lung disease. And after writing about 3 chapters, and of course I'd written about 3 chapters also, we were doing this parallel exercise. He contracted this very serious disease and died. And it was a tremendous shock. And so I had the option of either, just calling it quits and getting out of the contract, which I could have done, or going ahead. And I thought, I've got to write, in the memory of this man, I've got to write this book. Got to get it done. So I took what he had written and then, did my work and continued to write the book. And, I'm very happy I did that. So that's kind of how it all came about.
Okay, thank you. And another very important question, is dialogue with Christian fundamentalists or Q disciples ever useful, or is it just a colossal waste of time?
Well, I think in one sense it's a waste of time. The only thing that can work is uh, to listen respectfully, to show that you are really a respectful, caring person, and look around the edges for any points of commonality. For example, everybody cares about child abuse or abduction of children. It's something that's it's horrible. So if you can find areas of common ground, there aren't going to be too many, but if you can, that's a start. But I think if you think you're going to convert anybody, you're probably going to be very frustrated. I mean, they may eventually, by means of what you've said very gently and respectfully and all kind of other factors, they might move from their fundamentalism. But, you got to kind of just say, okay, you got to do the serenity prayer. There's some things I just can't change. And that's that. That's how I see it.
Very much so. Is the left ever guilty of conspiratorial thinking, you believe?
Say that again.
Is the left ever guilty of conspiratorial thinking?
Yeah, I think there can be lefties that can take the view that anybody who is a pious Christian conservative is somehow a Looney Tunes or just to be written off. And so I think there's we can paint a kind of a straw man that there's this awful kind of biblicist idiot out there who just is trying to, destroy freedom of speech and put down gays and all that. And so I think we have to avoid caricaturing people. There's a whole spectrum of folks out there.
Well, and for our next question, before I go into that, I'm going to preface so you folks know I was one of Ben's students well over 30 years ago, and Ben did mentorship, and he was my mentor at the time, and I'm sure he'll remember from our time in class that I used to be the wise ass student that would ask the hard questions and purposely push the buttons because I wanted deep answers. So I'm going to start asking some of those harder questions now.
Okay.
To what extent do you believe secular humanists, liberal Jews, Christians, Muslims, and other faith-based groups can work together in developing a common cause approach and stemming the onslaught of white Christian nationalistic beliefs and behaviors? What can we do to stem all this?
Yeah. Well, I think we can work together by supporting one another in the right reform. A Jew like myself can work with a group like this. I mean, it's such a privilege for me to speak to you folks today. It really is, and to see how many good things you're doing. I mean, it's just I'm truly truly humbled by the groups you have and your commitment and so forth. So there's a greater need for liberal folks, both in the religion camp and humanist groups, to try to make common cause. And I think there hasn't been enough of that. I think that there's a fear amongst even liberal religionists that somehow humanists are kind of these dark atheist folks who have no moral compass and all that. So certainly there's a need to try to reach out and have more dialogue. I mean, I know that's not a complete answer, but I think that's one way in which we could cooperate and help each other out.
Well, and that's excellent, because your answer draws right into the next question I have, which is sociologically speaking, how do the origins of white Christian nationalistic thinking get started? And that children who are exposed to evangelical beliefs and practices are never encouraged, because they are taught from the beginning they're born into evil or original sin, hellfire, and damnation. They're not encouraged to question authority or independently think. And often they experience arrested development, affecting their capacity to independently think critically, discern, and break away from all of those beliefs. And like you said, fear. And so I'm wondering, what are your views on this as to why we have these white Christian nationalists the way they are?
Well, there's a lot of programming that goes on. I mean, listen, any religion, even any humanistic group, in a sense, educates and, if you will, programs children. In the case of unit, to be decent and honest and thinking and questioning. In the case of fundamentalist folks, is to look at the fact the Bible is your absolute guide, and it's inerrant. And so, or for an ultra Orthodox Jewish person who decides that that way of life is just too confining, uh, the ability to break away from that is long, hard, and painful. And in some cases, I mean, it'll never happen, but uh, education, going to a good university, for example, and I'm going to advertise here, like Cal State Fullerton, or many other great universities, even Catholic universities like Loyola Marymount, which is a first class institution, or Marquette, where I taught for a while, open the mind and, have a professor who, in the words of another colleague of mine, said that the purpose of education is to irritate, agitate, and educate. In other words, there's got to be shaking of the foundations for people like that. And I've seen students come in and be very very uncomfortable with some of the things I've said. And little by little, if I try to be patient and respectful, you begin to see there's more to life than just the kind of rather narrow upbringing they had. Even though there may have been many good things about that, they were taught not only to believe in the Bible as being inerrant, but also to be truthful and respectful and honest and loving. But to wrench them away from that sense that they have all the truth is what is important. And I think that a humanistic education, a liberal education, where the word liberal there doesn't mean the liberal political party, it means liberalizing is the key. But it's a long haul. It's a great challenge.
Thank you so much for that answer, because it is very enlightening. And you kind of started answering my next question, and that we look at what happened on January 6th, and not just on the 6th, but what you brought up about Michigan and other places. And we see that with these Christian white nationalist folks, there's almost this ever present fear of being kicked out of the flock or the community or the group, and that because these people don't think for themselves, they they motivated so much because they don't think for themselves to just continue following, not question, and just accept the group as it is because they're so fearful of condemnation and ostracization.
Oh yes, definitely. Oh my goodness. In fact, if there was an amazing movie that was on, I think it was Amazon Prime or something, or Netflix, one of those. Anyway, I saw it, called um, Unorthodox. What a film! And it was about a young woman who was locked in an ultra Orthodox Hasidic community in New York. The people that have the big hats and the strimals and the side locks and all that. And she got married, and the movie was amazing to show you description of the whole liturgy of this. Anyway, along with that, she gets married, and she really can't consummate the marriage, and she finally leaves and goes to Germany, and the whole painful journey of this, which she went through, was really quite something, and to see it. So it's hard. It's hard for people, and I think too sometimes there are closet liberals, people in an Orthodox Jewish or fundamentalist Christian group where they can't make the break, but that they're secretly, they're kind of closet liberals. But it's just very, very hard to break away from that conditioning. So all one can do is try to just put education out there and hope that it catches.
Well, thank you so much, because I saw that movie. It was unorthodox, and for
Yeah.
me, it hit home in a way because I was actually number 7 out of the first 14 to start at what's known as the Long Beach Hebrew Academy, and this is way back in the 60s, that moved to Westminster, California, but it was a Hasidic school of the Lubavitch sect. And yes, I had the payas, the locks, and the tzitzis, the fringes, and the whole bit. And it's a very insular community and very, very, very difficult to break away from. A lot of guilt and shaming if you don't follow their way. I mean, even to the point, and I think a lot of our folks who are humanists really don't realize that when you're that ultra orthodox, they actually somewhat ostracize people who are conservative or reform or reconstructionist. They aren't even very accepting of Jews in their own community. And
Yeah.
so it's a very, very powerful thing. And that movie really, I really loved how much it laid out the angst that she felt. She went to Germany, and the fact that her mother had been a lesbian. I mean, they tied all of those
Yeah.
pieces together wonderfully, and it
Yeah.
really showed how that community was just horrible. They treated her absolutely horribly.
Yeah. There's
And I
an old
know,
saying.
go ahead.
In the medieval church, there was a saying that two sayings. First of all, extra ecclesiam nihil salus est. I can't shut off my Latin. Outside the church, there was no salvation. The other one was error, ERROR, has no rights. So there is truth. There's nothing but this truth we have and nothing else. And if you get out of line, we might burn you at the stake. Now, listen, in fairness, the Catholic Church was not burning people at the stake every afternoon, but they did do it. And they also tried to forcibly convert Jews to Christianity. And so, this was the terror. I mean, there was a world where, you get out of line and you might end up dead. And even now, as Jeremy's saying, the pressures of moving from a group that you belonged with and where your family belongs is very difficult. And people like that need a lot of compassion. A lot of work to be done.
And I know we have questions from others, and I have a couple more that I want to get through to. And like you just said, Ben, it's not just ultra Orthodox Jews. Anybody who's accepted into a community and then is almost ostracized or pushed out because they're not conforming. This is very much what we're seeing in white Christian nationalism and evangelical belief. And that leads to my next question, which is, I don't know how many people are familiar with James Fowler's book entitled Red Brain, Blue Brain, and where he talks about certain brain structures being dominant in how the form of specific stimulation, such as flight or fight in the amygdala, or more loving behaviors in the insula. And what the question really is does this research provide any understanding to your conclusions about why white Christian nationalistic thinking and behavior is the way it is?
Well, yeah, I think that I just think as a species, there are people who are DNA wise prone to be more cautious, conservative about everything in life, and other folks who are more adventurous and open to new ideas. And it seems to me in a perfectly evolving world, which we have in so many respects, it's the clash between liberal and conservative thinking, whether it's in politics or religion or philosophy or even science, that makes for progress of the human community. You have to have people. I mean, if we had one political party in this country, it would be a dictatorship. We all know that. We may not like one party or the other party very much, but we know that inevitably we have to have both parties or many parties, as in the case of Israel, for example, too many parties, in my opinion, for the clash of ideas to generate more healthy thinking, because nobody knows everything. There's a great saying from Robert Frost: "We all proceed with insufficient knowledge. Nobody knows everything." In any field. And, it's good for our humility to realize how, I look at some of my students and I know they're smarter than I am in a lot of ways because they're studying science, engineering, art. And there I am. I have my toolbox, but, anyway, humility is a good virtue.
Yes. And And that leads into my final question, which I'll shorten, having to do with George Lakoff's research about parenting, specifically his book in Moral Politics, How Liberals and Conservatives Think. And he asserts that conservative parents, meaning the authoritarian parenting style, strict and versus the liberal parenting style, which is more open-minded and loving and caring. And in his research, he posits that a lot of people who have this conservative thinking, that this definitely affects their politics and the way they vote and the way they look at the world. And I wanted to ask, does any of this resonate, and did any of this come up in the research for your book?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, and again, there's a book I'm trying to think of the author. It was kind of like the previous book you just mentioned, that about the kind of way that human beings tend to be programmed somewhat differently, conservatively or liberally. So yeah, it was just, I mean, you could just see that you're never going to get people to think the way you'd like them to think. People, I mean, not the people that you agree with, but a lot of people out in the world who look at all kinds of issues. For example, the economy or science or whatever, the way you want them to, and you have to just start by having the insight that, okay, all right, listen, we're all different. When the lady next door says that she's not going to get vaccinated, I say there's something there deep down that made her feel that way. And, there's a little bit that I can do around the edges, like saying, well, as I said earlier, what if you, accidentally had the virus, but it was nascent, it was dormant in you, and boom, you gave somebody else. It's just, again, the serenity prayer, we've got to be aware that the world is never going to be the way we would like it. Okay. And just kind of move forward with a certain amount of humility and humor, and at the same time, not just humor and humility, but also a sense that, okay, we do have values that are damned important. And let me say one more thing. There's a law that's being debated in the Florida legislature right now that would enable Big Brother, as it were, to record lectures by professors and have the state pass on whether they were, fair and balanced, to use that word that Fox News always uses. My God, you mean I'm going to have Big Brother taping my lectures? I mean, this is just unbelievable that this degree of authoritarianism would ever come to pass in California. Now, I'm just getting the first details about this. This hasn't become law yet, I don't think, but that is really scary stuff. It's the old canard. All universities, public universities, are just hotbeds of secularism and free love and liberal thinking. That's so simplistic. It really is. I mean, the business school at Cal State Fullerton is not a hotbed of liberalism. Let me tell you. Okay, I mean, these folks out there to teach you how to do business, and so I mean, these generalizations of that kind just are very upsetting. But that Florida law, I'm going to keep track. I'm going to keep looking at that one. That is really spooky to me. Okay.
You're right. There are so many spooky laws and weirdness out there right now, and it's a good thing we're all coming together to discuss it. And I'm done with my questions, and I thank you very much. And so I'm going to open it up. Michelle, why don't you unmute yourself and go ahead, and you're up.
Thank you. And I have to apologize because I hate two-part questions, but I 100% have a two-part question because that's how interesting I found your talk. So my first one is you were speaking about, well, I'll just read it. Are there occasions when it is more beneficial for a person to remove themselves from being influenced by extremists, people who are extremists, white nationals per se, but so with the idea of mental health and safety?
All right. So are you sort of implying that certain people you deal with who really are psychologically agitated or disturbed or in a situation where kind of rebutting them in any way is really going to be dangerous. I mean, that you can, kind of push them off the edge if you sort of push too hard or become too assertive.
No,
Because,
I would say for oneself,
oh,
psychologically exposing themselves to people like that.
yeah, I think that, yeah. Listen, we all need a space to, I know in my case, I'm kind of a political junkie and a religious junkie too, I guess, in the sense that I teach religion. But uh, I'm just saying, you have to have a way of backing away and not getting overly involved. Nobody can change the world. Uh, you can do your little teeny bit. I mean, there's another famous Talmudic saying that we are not charged to finish the work, but we have to at least start it. You have to do something. But yeah, I think it's going to be careful not to get too involved and just you can drive yourself nuts with anxiety about you know uh, political parties and movements and so forth. And I think one has to back away and just meditate, go out in nature, have some peace. Yeah, just as my mother likes to say, enough is plenty. In other words, just don't go too far. Just don't get too involved. Keep some peace of heart. Hope that
And
helps a little.
yes, and you answered my second question as well. I appreciate you.
Mr. Hubbard, hi.
Yes.
You're a student from 1995, so it's been great to see you back here, and you're looking
Oh
great.
my
And
God.
yeah,
Wonderful. Yeah.
have you seen any other society or country that has gone to maybe the American extreme, and then how were they able to come back to maybe the center? Is there any kind of example of cultures or communities that's we got to make the turn, and they did it. They did it successfully. So I want to know.
Well, yeah, I think that look at the French Revolution, followed by the Terror. This Robespierre and this awful situation in France. I think there was some of that. And of course, France had become a very liberal and rather non-religious country in effect. So I think that happened there. And in Great Britain, there was the interregnum period where the monarchy was overthrown, and there was this period of radicalism, and then Britain gradually kind of moved itself back to kind of a parliamentary democracy, where the authoritarian king was now pretty well neutralized and becomes kind of a symbolic figurehead. So, yeah, I think it can. I think it can happen. One had hoped that that Russia, after the fall of the communist Soviet Union, might become more liberal. And there was a little period there, under Yeltsin, even though poor Yeltsin was a troubled guy and he was an alcoholic, but nonetheless that Russia might become more centered. And then all of a sudden, boom, along comes Putin. And so I guess what I'm saying is that countries can gyrate back and forth. And that's why I fear what could happen to us, that we might, move to something really, really, oppressive. I don't think it's going to happen, but so yeah, I think these kind of things happen, and I'm just glad we're at least in the game. So good to see you.
Thank
After all
you, and
these years.
thank you, team.
Okay.
Okay, Pete, you're up.
Okay. I saw a headline, might have been in Nation magazine, asking why aren't more people revolting? I mean, there's so many homeless, people are hungry, people have health problems and so on. How come these people aren't revolting? It's primarily because they're unable to physically, maybe mentally, and so on. Now part of the far-right conservative revolution, there seem to be a lot of veterans involved, coming back from Iraq and other
Yeah.
places, and veterans aren't treated so well. They have health problems, mental problems, PTSD, and so on. But they're physically able to get out and revolt, and I think a lot of them are doing that. So it's got a problem. We certainly need more social justice in the country, more economic justice, and so on. There are a lot of problems. So
Oh my goodness.
we'll have to see what happens.
Listen, when you look at the disparity between what a CEO like Jeff Bezos makes a year and what somebody on the line in an Amazon warehouse makes, it is just astounding. If I may be political just for a minute, the notion that the only people that count are shareholders, not the guy working on the line in Amazon or at a Walmart store, it does make you wonder why there isn't a kind of a people's revolt in a way. And yet, ironically, the Amazon group in Alabama voted against unionizing, which disappointed me as a former union guy at Cal State, and my father was a union leader. So I think part of it might be that we're so downtrodden by COVID that, it's just hard to kind of get anything going. I mean, in terms of even practical meeting and so forth. But I think there's a real need for what you're saying. I mean, just, like that movie, what was it called? Network. I'm sick of it and I'm not taking it anymore. That kind of mentality. I'd like to see more of that. I think that, especially poor weakened folks. In fact, may I just say one of the reasons for this white nationalism is that we have white men who are making less money than their fathers made in their lifetimes. That is, the old jobs in manufacturing, auto, coal mining, steel, and so forth, those jobs are gone. And so if you got out of high school and you haven't had any more training, you're going to be working at Amazon or at Walmart or something for the rest of your life and making minimum wage. And it's tragic, but I think it's one of the reasons for the frustration that some people like that feel. They feel that they're white, the country's changing, ethnicity is changing, they're not making any money, they can't afford a house, and so we got to do something. And sometimes what they do is radicalism, like storming the Capitol. Anyway, listen, it's kind of a scattered answer, but I do think we need more people to get out there and do something.
Yeah, thank you.
So next up is Jason and then Jeanette. Go for it, Jason.
There we go. So,
Okay, all right.
as we're talking about white nationalists, I want to know who's defined as a white nationalist, because when we're talking about white nationalists, it's usually in the matter of radicalization. So, who do we consider to be a white nationalist? Is it someone with a greater intensity of this descriptive hierarchical division of people? Could it be someone with a moderate amount of ethnocentrism? When is someone considered to be a white nationalist?
I think when they join a group that's devoted to hate, for example, Boogaloo Boys, Proud Boys, what are some of the other names? Oath Keepers, and so forth. When you join a group like that is bent on some kind of radical action, not just sitting around and arguing, but actually, storming a Capitol or trying to bomb something, and God forbid, use that term, reason forbid that we have any more terrible instances like going back all the way to Oklahoma City with Timothy McVeigh and all this. That when you get in a group like that, you get into a hate group. And by the way, the Southern Poverty Law Center says there are 833 hate groups in this country. Klan, neo-Nazi, Volkish, which I guess is really neo-Nazi. You call yourself Volkish. All these groups, anti-Semitic and so forth. When you get into a group like that, and there are tens of thousands of people I think you're then really committed to hate. You're hating somebody. You're hating blacks or Jews or Asians. And when your level of discontent turns to that kind of hate, I think then you've really stepped across the line. You know, it's one thing to disagree with somebody, but boy, those kind of folks are so full of hate that I just worry about what they might do. And I'm thinking right now, I'm like, you know, right today, tomorrow, down the line, uh, I think about the safety of Biden and Harris. And
Yeah.
so anyway, that's my take.
And even in our own backyard in Southern California, in Poway, we had the synagogue shooting happen recently.
Yeah, scary. I mean, really, there's just enough unhinged people out there that are full of grievance and often some mental problems. And they've got guns. You know, after all, we have more guns than people in America. And, you know, I'm not talking about law-abiding people who have a weapon. Some people need to have a weapon for protection. I'm talking about the idea that everybody has to have an AK-47, you know, or anyway, I don't want to get off of the gun thing because I respect gun owners, but not the kind of zealous folks out there. Okay.
Thank you.
Anyhow, I was going to say, don't get me started on how many hate crimes are directed at synagogues or Jews or Jewish community centers. I think the list is too big to count, but I want to go ahead and give Jeanette a chance.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I don't see myself on the screen. There I go. Okay.
There she is. Hi, Jeanette.
Hey Ben, how you doing?
An old friend.
From 30 years, right. That's right. And thank you for letting me know about this. I appreciate it. As you know, Ben, I am writing a book right now. It's fiction, but one of the characters is a young boy that gets seduced into the alt-right. And I've been researching for a couple of years the process by which they do that. And I was wondering if you have any comments on that. I mean, I can tell you, I can say that these are kids that are targeted that are 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old children. By the way, not unlike what Hitler did, except the approach is a little different. And they're online and they get sent memes and they get curious and they get on these websites and they go into Reddit and then they go into subreddit and then they get into our dank memes and they are fed, they're given jobs, responsibilities. And so these kids that were so isolated and some of them somewhat psychologically damaged for different reasons in their lives, they get so hooked in because they feel like they belong. And they become radicalized by the information that is forwarded their way. So it's like, for those of you who have young boys, keep talking to them. It's so important. And Ben, I was wondering what you would have to say about that.
Well, first of all, you and I have talked before, and I think the idea of your book, the conception, is really good because often novels can bring out truths, and in the picture you're painting, especially the online world. I didn't talk enough about the online world. It's just, it's everywhere. You know, just any kid 10 years old. In fact, they know more about the online world than most of us adults do. I just think that there's got to be ways of monitoring the online world better. And I'm glad that Facebook and Twitter and the others have made some attempts to try to get rid of the most radical stuff, but I'm not sure they've gone far enough. And I just think that there's got to be a counter. For example, the Southern Poverty Law Center has some really good positive sites in terms of trying to tell people the way the world really is, and in the way we need to care about one another and dialogue with one another and talk to one another. But it is just scary, and I just feel that a book like the one you're writing will open a lot of eyes and maybe make parents aware that you just can't have your kid in the basement online all afternoon. You know,
Right.
It's scary. I think more monitoring of the internet of adolescents is important, even though it's very hard to do because they're very good at sneaking around and finding an alternate site to hook up online at somebody else's house or whatever. But anyway, I think parents have got a big job. The positive media have got a big job, Southern California Poverty Law Center. And, all I can say is I like what you're doing. I think it's a great idea, great project. And I want to see this book come to fruition.
Thank you. Well, you'll be seeing it along the way. And I think that too, it's important to realize that these groups, they're Proud Boys, it's like, as you said, Oath Keepers, KKK, they're all throughout the country. They've been throughout the country for years, decades, decades and decades. What happened recently was they found each other through social media and they became one unit. And it's really, really important that we recognize how this happens. We just need to know what's happening and how it's happening.
Yeah, hate is really scary.
Yeah.
It really, it just takes people and grabs them and just possesses them in a way. And that is really freaking scary.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. Thank you, Ben.
Sure.
Before we go on to Dave, I wanted to make a couple of comments. I did teach elementary school before I became a professor at the university level. And I remember, parents would come to me, my kid's going on the internet, what do I do? And I would tell them, don't just take the keyboard and stick it in the closet. Take it and put it in your trunk and drive away with it. You cannot give them access because they will. They'll climb into the closet. They'll get the keyboard. They'll find any way they can to get on the internet. And they're more brilliant than we give them credit for. And the other thing I really wanted to comment with is my work with the Anti-Defamation League here in Orange County. I've been the chairman of their education committee for a lot of years. And one of the things we've found is bullying in school and also the internet hate groups. We've had, like you were saying, Jeanette, we've had hate groups in Orange County, in South Orange County, predominantly Mission Viejo, for the last 20 to 30 years. We had in Costa Mesa the Revisionist Center, which, rewrites history according to what they want. And we have been a hotbed of anti-Semitism, racism, discrimination in Orange County for decades. And you're right, in the last 5 years, because someone in high upper government gave them permission, they've been coming out of the woodwork. It's not that it's new, it's there. And we keep statistics at the ADL on every hate crime throughout the United States. And what I want you all to know that's very significant that a lot of people don't realize is in every police car, in every sheriff's car in our area, in fact, in the entire country, there is a link placed on their computers so that they can immediately access the ADL's website on hate, so that they can identify every symbol, whether it's a gang tattoo, whether it's 88 or 411 or whatever numbers it is. So they know when they pull someone over, they're able to bring it up immediately and go, okay, you're part of the Aryan youth, or you're part of the Heil Hitler people, or you're part of this. So, we've worked in tandem with the police for decades now, because we know this is a problem. And very much like you said, Ben, hate is so vile and out of control. And the one thing I really personally believe from my research is that children are born in tabula rasa. Hate is taught. You are not born hating. You are born blank, and it is the family of origin or your community that teaches you hate, and it's vile.
So I wanted to respond to you, Jeremy, because hate is vile and offensive, but also remember that propaganda feeds conflict. It draws battle lines. It puts us into conflict with one another. So we have to also be aware of that. And so that makes me wonder whether there's some spurious connections or false equivalence going on. That fundamentalism was basically an apolitical theology. It was a reaction against the social gospel. And then evangelicalism, even in its early stages, was not very political. I mean, it's based really on a personal salvation message. Even Jimmy or Billy Graham was more like a Catholic, socially conservative, but also economically more liberal. And then we had the Christian Coalition come in, and the Bible's always been used for both good. I mean, the Bible has been cited by both sides forever. In fact, the interpretation of the Bible changes over time based on political circumstances. And also, it may bring up the question of why the social gospel's failure in that context. And the idea of a Christian Nazi, it's problematic. Why attach Christianity to something that could be really not Christianity? It could be an abomination to Christianity, and things like Q, and then all the other violent ideologies and beliefs. And yes, leftists can be extremists, especially when they say that nonviolence doesn't work. To me, that's when they've crossed the line into extremism. So I'm wondering, because basically white people call themselves Christian. I mean, if you're going to say white nationalism or call it Christian nationalism, it's just like saying the same thing in that sense, because anybody can identify as a Christian. So, and they're not necessarily the same people who are going to church. And so, and I'm wondering if you're aware of the movement in evangelicalism to a more social justice focus, and maybe that should be the movement to a new social gospel, or more activist, because what we have is silence, and that silence is in part motivated and caused by a secularist ideology in the church.
Well, yeah, I mean, listen, a group like, what's this? I just had it on the tip of my tongue. There's a movement within the evangelical world. They have a publication, and there's a very powerful leader. I even interviewed him once, many years ago. That doing exactly what you're saying. In other words, taking a conservative perspective, but taking the best of the social teaching of Jesus, for example, and saying this is the heart of the gospel, and not questions about truth or, that is theological questions, but practical questions about how we, in fact, love the least of these. Take Matthew 25, that powerful passage, and we've gotten so far away from that. As Sojourners magazine. It was really a wonderful magazine. And so there is a movement out there, but it's kind of a still small voice right now, because the predominant voice is the people who, they're anti-abortion, they're anti-gay, they're anti-this, they're very, very militant, and they're drowning out the more quiet voices of people who think that there can be a meeting of the minds between social gospelers and kind of people who are more in the camp of kind of a conservative Christianity, but who at the same time really care about what's happening in the world and want to make common cause with anybody that will work with them. So by the way, one other point, you kind of touched on it a little bit. After the Scopes trial in 1925, when even though Scopes actually lost the trial, and then he was finally acquitted on a technicality by the Tennessee Supreme Court, but the fundamentalists was so humiliated and mocked by that trial, they went underground right up until the moral majority in Reagan, in the Reagan era, and they kind of came out of the closet. And now, ironically, they've kind of begun to see in a way that maybe they got too involved in politics, that the gospel is not politics. I've heard, like some Southern Baptist leaders say that. So it's funny how these different currents are out there, and I think that when religion becomes politicized, it gets electrocuted.
Right, but that's a problem right there, because basically it's not that religion has become politicized, it's the wrong politics. So it's always a reason why we go back into silence, and why the church, the liberal church, falls silent in response to this. And I really think at this point, we need to face what I would consider to be idolatry and false prophecy in the Christian community. And that's going to be a part of the church. And ironically, it might mean asking people to come back to the true tenets of their individual faith, whatever that faith would be.
Hey, yeah, right.
Thank you.
No more cheap grace. Thank you. Good point.
Well, I know Arvind has his hand up, so go ahead, Arvind.
Great speech, Benjamin. I really appreciated your comments and ideas. It's really relevant at this point of time. I would just like to shine a spotlight on one of the underreported sections of white nationalism. If you look at KKK, Aryan Brotherhood, the justice system, the prison system has been a hotbed for the rise of this. I mean, you see some petty criminals who are not nationalists or white nationalists, they go into the prison system. And as we know from the statistics, the prison system is full of the minority community. They're overrepresented in the prisons. And in prison, the whites, the groups, they tend to congregate in order to defend themselves or whatever the prison politics is. And that actually breeds a lot of white nationalism as a kind of defense mechanism. And it goes into an extremist and nationalist and even religious pitch at times. So have you given any thought to this? What would you recommend as some of the reforms that we should be looking at?
Well, our prison system is really so problematic. It really is. I mean, for one thing, so many people are in for low-level drug offenses like, crack, cocaine, sentences, and so forth that are just unreasonable. I know a lot of those are being overturned, but it's just a breeding ground. Some prison systems are more enlightened. When you have prison systems that are run by outside agencies as a business, that alone is very troubling. And I just think that there's a whole world of work to be done in the prison system. I have a friend, Rabbi Seidman, who is the Jewish chaplain to the Orange County to Jewish prisoners, and there are chaplains that go out from all the different faiths, but it's just I don't know what the answer is. It's such a hotbed. These people are so angry and disillusioned, and there they are, prisoners locked up 23 hours a day. That I just think that the prison got to be overhauled. I think there should be no more of these prison as a business, where the state says, like Alabama, okay, we're just going to, here, you take the prison system and take care of it. That's just no way to run a railroad. I mean, that's just because you're going to have sort of mercenary folks out there treating prisoners without any respect. And we just need more people, more social workers, more chaplains, including secular chaplains, going in and saying, listen, there is hope. You can take advantage of educational avenues in the prison, and there's hope to get out of here and get your life going. But right now, it just seems to me, and again, I'm not an authority on this at all, that the prison system is really being run very poorly. And I think it's a tragedy. And it's, as you said, it's a hotbed for anger and for people getting into, neo-Nazi groups. Now, some people, of course, have a prison conversion, and there's been quite a few individuals who've gone to Islam, African Americans in particular, who become part of Islam, where before they were just drifting, had no religious, they might have nominally raised as Christians, but that's more positive for the most part. But it's a big problem. It's a big mess, and I just wish the government would focus on that. It's very sad. A lot of wasted lives. It's the best I can do with that one.
Thank you so much, Ben, for bringing that up, because one of the things we've done in our social justice book group is talk about Ibram Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, in which he really spells out the problems with the policies. And he brings up the prison system, how crack cocaine in inner city neighborhoods, but powder cocaine in suburbs, and the prison terms of 3 strikes laws so abjectly different, and how these policies are so steeped in this country and really have to be changed. And I'm glad there's such an awareness and that you brought that up. And I know that Tina has a question, so go ahead and unmute, Tina.
Okay.
Hi, wonderful, wonderful lecture. I'm an alumni too of Cal State Fullerton, yay. I also taught at the community college level in a program of medical program. Basically, the point I wanted to talk about was we talk about, I have a brother who's a fundamentalist Christian, and he's caused a lot of havoc within the family. My other brother, who's a defense attorney, is concerned with him all the time. But what I see is the problem is envy and the problem of not having the ability to get somewhere. I was involved in information technologies for 25 years before I went to education. And what I saw was the outsourcing, and then all, like you say, all the young men going. And I think that our whole thing is that people are fearful. That's what drives a lot of people to religion. And they need someone to feel that if you've got things a certain way, everything will be perfect. I feel I've always been a humanist. I was raised Catholic and fed that problem, and actually went to parochial school for 8 years. And I remember why it was so difficult for me was they would tell you any question you had, it's not yours to question God's will. I would ask, why is this? It's not yours to question God's will. So education isn't put out there. But I think that there's a fear in so many people that they're never going to have anything. They're never going to get the opportunity. How can we get rid of some of that fear? I think that if more people are humanists than we know, and I also think that no one knows about humanism. How can we get out there like the churches are? Why can't we have a church of humanism? You know what I'm saying? You hear what I'm saying? Because to me, it's been very frustrating my whole life. The authoritarianism, everything.
I think you kind of have. I think that these these various groups that were talked about at the beginning of our session, these OC humanist associations and meetings and study groups, I mean, you know, that's kind of a de facto, not church, but it's a philosophical group. And we all need that. And listen, one of the reasons why the Unitarian Church has become popular is because a lot of people who just couldn't see belief in God wanted some kind of structure, some kind of humanist organization, joined the Unitarians, for whom belief in God is there's no test. You know, if you do, fine. If you don't, as most probably don't, that's just fine. So, but I do think people do need an organization. And on the other point, I think there's a great line from the movie On the Waterfront, Marlon Brando. You might remember it, 1953 or something. And he'd been a boxer, and he got injured. So he was working on the docks, and there were all these problems with the labor unions. And he said to one of his friends, I could have been somebody. I could have been important. Everybody wants to be somebody. And we've got to find out what that means. There are all kinds of ways of being somebody, but you got to find it. And so I think
when you're 14, 13, you're looking for it. And that's where I think we need to find a way to influence these young people, because it is too late. My brother, whatever, you know, I mean, he's going to be the way he's going to be. I mean, we just worry about him because I think he's too involved in this stuff. But young people, we have the opportunity to do something, but how can we do the most for them? And having groups, I mean, I agree, but we're all like-minded. How do we get more that are similar-minded and not yet quite like-minded to come into our fold? I think that's our challenge. Because when I talk to people, as a professor, you know, you have to be very
Yeah.
aware of how you talk to people, and especially students, because you never know what they'll do to you. So what
Right.
I would always tell people, what do we have in common? We have so much more in common than we do not. It
Good,
doesn't
good,
matter
really
what
good.
color you
Yeah.
are.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good. In fact, that's a nice opener. You know,
Yeah.
you know, who was it? One of the great African American writers. They won the Nobel Prize um, for literature. Anyway, she said we're more alike than unalike. No matter who you are, human beings have more in common. And so, as you said, build on where can you agree? I mean, all kinds of simple things like caring about the earth, caring about animals, or if you can build a bridge, that's a really key. I think in terms of this idea of listening and dialogue, to begin with things that we can all agree on. Like in my book, I tried to point out that, as I said, there were many areas where care for animals, for the earth, for orphans, widows. I mean, there's this core of stuff that we all really care about, no matter where you are on the spectrum. Anyway, yeah, but listen, it's a real challenge,
And
Lots of work to be done.
that's my challenge, is trying to do something that I feel is really going to help, because hey, I was a product of the 60s, and basically I was demonstrating back then, and I see what's going on now, and it is worse. It is worse
Yeah,
because
it
we
is.
have so much more knowledge. We should be so much more intellectually smarter, but no one has any emotional intelligence. And I've done a lot of research on looking at the EQ, the emotional quotient, and how our brain.
Whoop, I kind of lost. Yeah.
Well, and
Connection
with
kind of
that,
lost. You get the point. Very important point. We
and especially though with that, we're at 3:30. I know there are people who might need to jump off, and you're welcome to do so. We won't hold it against you because we know people have certain time limits. A few of us are going to stay on extra if anybody wants to talk. And Dr. Hubbard, I wanted to say thank you so much for being here and for gracing us with all your knowledge and your insights into what's going on. And if you want, you're welcome to stay on with us. If you need to run, we will not take it personally. And I also wanted to say thank you to everybody who's come on for wonderful questions and for a great conversation. I think we all got something very special out of this today and learned a lot more than we had before we came in. So again, thank you so much, Ben.
Okay, well, listen, I'm going to sign off here. I've got some honeydew activity to take care of.
Don't we all?
Yeah, right.
Don't we all?
Okay.
Humanistic home duties. So I'm going to sign off. Listen, it's been an honor. Honestly, the questions were great. You're a wonderful group. I mean, keep doing the great things you're doing for our world, and we'll meet again. And I'm just so pleased to have been with you and to see how many people signed up here. We have over 99 people. That's a nice group. So thanks, Jeremy, for all you did to set this up. You did a great job. You were patient with me when I was having some technological issues. And Brett, Red, rather, thank you for the way you've handled this so well, as you always have. And again, I'll sign off here, but peace out, everybody.
And before you run out, Ben, a round of applause for Dr. Hubbard.
Yes,
thank you so much
definitely.
for having been here.
Okay.
Thank you, Ben.
And we'll see you again in the future. Thanks again.
Okay, for sure.